We continue now at the top of Daf Tzadi Aleph Amid Beis in Meseches Yevamos. This is Yevamos Daf 91b. On the previous Amud, Rav said that the halacha is like Rabbi Shimon, that if a woman remarries on the basis of the testimony of two witnesses, the two witnesses say that her husband has died, and she remarries on that basis, so if it turns out that her husband is still alive, she can go back to her first husband. She doesn't require any get in that situation from the second husband, because again, the whole thing is considered an accident. That's what Rabbi Shimon said in the Mishnah, and Rav said the halacha is like Rabbi Shimon. And the Gemara had asked, Rav Sheshes had asked, how can Rav say that the halacha is like Rabbi Shimon? That implies that the Rabbanan disagree with Rabbi Shimon. But that's not true. The Rabbanan would also agree with Rabbi Shimon. They would also say that if there were two witnesses, she certainly can go back to the first husband. In other words, there's a full agreement of all Tanoim in this particular situation. And Rav Sheshes proved it from a brisa, because there was a brisa that seemed to make a distinction between a woman who married on the basis of two witnesses and a woman who married on the basis of one witness, where she's getting permission from the Bezdin. And the brisa makes exactly this distinction and says that in a situation of two witnesses, she can go back to the first husband. She doesn't require a get. But in the case of one witness, in the case where she did it on the permission of the Bezdin with one witness, so there she does require a get. And the Gemara said that must be the Rabbanan. Why is it that that brisa must be the Rabbanan? Because there's another brisa that says that that seems to imply that she never requires a get. And that brisa would apparently be according to Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon would make no distinction at all in either case and say no get is required. And therefore, since Rabbi Shimon makes no distinction and says a get is never required, it must be the brisa that's making the distinction is the Rabbanan. But you do see that Rabbi Shimon and the Rabbanan agree in a situation where there are two witnesses. And so now the Gemara continues with another explanation of that second brisa. Ravina Amar Ravina says, L'inyan carbon katani. That second brisa is talking about carbon. It's not talking about get at all. And it could be that Rabbi Shimon does not say what you thought he said. In other words, Rabbi Shimon does not say that she never requires a get. That's not actually true. Really, that brisa is only talking about carbon. What does that brisa mean? It means asu bezdin bahora asan kizadon ish beisha. If Bezdin issues the ruling allowing her to get remarried, that's as if you had a typical case of adultery that was done on purpose. And what happens when it's done on purpose? V'lo masya carbon, and no carbon is brought. But again, the brisa is not weighing in at all on the issue of get. And al piedim, and when it comes to a situation where she marries on the basis of the testimony of two witnesses, kishigagas ish beisha. That's like a case where the adultery was committed by mistake. Umasya carbon, and a carbon is brought. And Rashi over here says, v'lo ma'isa carbon diyachid shasa bo'ras Bezdin pater. The halach is that if an individual does something because the Bezdin told him that it's okay to do it, they're pater from a carbon. Kedi alfin and baharius mibaso. So that's what we learn out in Harius, and so that's why again in a situation where it was done al pi horas Bezdin, that's like zadon ish beisha, no carbon is brought. But again, it has nothing to do with whether or not there is a get, and therefore if that is the case, so then it comes out you don't have any proof that Rabbi Shimon always says that there's no get. It could very well be that Rabbi Shimon himself makes the distinction between a situation of two edim and between a situation where it's al pi the Bezdin, and therefore it could be that the Rabbanan disagree with Rabbi Shimon. And the Gemara continues with another answer. If you want, I could say hakamaisa Rabbanan. That first brisa that you brought, that actually is the Rabbanan. Now we initially thought that brisa was making a distinction and saying that when there are two edim, no get is required, and the Rabbanan agree with Rabbi Shimon. But now we're going to read that brisa differently. V'taritzachi. Here's how you should read that brisa. Chutz me'eshes ish v'shenisis al pi Bezdin, with the exception of an eshes ish v'shenisis al pi Bezdin. Not eshes ish shenisis al pi Bezdin. It's not one case. It's actually two separate cases. There's eshes ish, meaning a situation where she's marrying by two witnesses. V'shenisis al pi Bezdin, or if she's marrying with the permission of the court. And in both of those cases, the Rabbanan will say a get is required, and they in fact do argue on Rabbi Shimon. As Rashi over here says, Hach kamaisa dekatani chutz me'eshes ish kula Rabbanan hi. That brisa is the Rabbanan. V'lo tisni shenisis. Don't have it read shenisis. Demashma avol be'edim lo. That would imply that if she married through Bezdin, that's one thing, but if it was with witnesses, it would be a different halacha. That's not the case. Elatar's vishanisis, so mishtam and tarvayu, really, it should be vishanisis, and meaning we're talking about both cases that they require a get. Chutz me'eshes ish dahainu be'edim, if you have a woman who marries al pi edim, vishanisis al pi Bezdin be'echad, or if she marries through Bezdin with one aid, the tarvayu bo get. According to the Rabbanan, in both cases, a get will be required. Again, Rabbi Shimon would say that by two witnesses, a get is not required. Once a get is required, that means that she's actually usher to the first husband. Again, the Rabbanan would argue with Rabbi Shimon, and that's why Rav said the halacha is like Rabbi Shimon. And the Gemara continues, Meisiv Ula. Ula asks the following question, Mi amrin and my havelo lemeva. Do we really say the logic of Rav Sheshes of what else is there that she could have done? Rav Sheshes again argued that if she married on the basis of the testimony of two witnesses, so there was nothing else she could have done. Of course she should have gotten remarried. Two witnesses said her husband had died, and so therefore she did nothing wrong. Everyone should agree with Rabbi Shimon woman that she's allowed to go back to her first husband if it turns out he's alive. But do we really say such logic? But we learned in a Mishnah, this is a Mishnah in Gittin. Kasav l'shem malchus sheina hogenis. Let's say he writes the get, talking about the sofer is writing a get, and he dates it according to a kingdom that's not proper, meaning not according to the kingdom that they're actually sitting in, but some other government's dating system. Or l'shem malchus madai, l'shem malchus yavan. Let's say he puts the dates according to the kingdom of Madai or the kingdom of Yavan, meaning kingdoms that don't exist anymore. Or lebinyan abayis, lechurban abayis, he dates it according to when the Beis HaMikdash was built, or according to when the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. All of these are improper ways to date a get. Haya b'mizrach v'kasa b'mayriv. Let's say it was in the east, it took place in the east, but he wrote in the west. Or b'mayriv v'kasa b'mizrach, it took place in the west, and he wrote in the east. In all of these cases, the get is no good. And the halach is teitze mizeh mizeh v'chol hadrachim ha'elu ba. Halach is she has to divorce the first husband, and she also divorces the second husband, because we say that get is not a kosher get. She needs a new get from the first husband, and let's say she remarried on the basis of that get, so she also has to separate from that husband. And chol hadrachim ha'elu ba means all the penalties that we normally give to a woman who remarries when she should not have remarried, they're going to apply in this case as well. And so the Gemara says, Ve'amai, but why should that be true? According to Rav Sheshes, if something happens by total accident, we don't give these penalties. So Lema mai hava lo lemevad, we should say, what else should she have done? She had a get, she thought it was kosher. As Rashi over here says, Svura ha'isa shu get kosher, she thought it was a get kosher. What else could she have done? We should apply the same logic as Rav Sheshes, but it seems like the Mishnah does not apply that logic. That's a kasha in Rav Sheshes. And the Gemara answers, no, iboi lo lakruye legita. What she should have done was, she should have given the get to a Talmud Chacham to read it, and he would have told her that it was not a kosher get, so there really was something that she should have done, and that's why these penalties apply. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Shimi Barashi. Rav Shimi Barashi says, Tashma, coming here, another proof to this issue. Hakones as Yevamto v'holchot sarasa v'nisis. Let's say a person marries his Yevama, and the co-wife goes and she gets married because she thinks the Yivam is taken care of. V'nimtza zu islandess, then it turns out that the Yevama who did the Yivam, she's an islandess, she's a sexually underdeveloped woman, it's not a good Yivam, and now really the co-wife should not have went and gotten married. And so the halach is, Teitze mizeh mizeh, she has to separate from this one and this one, meaning the co-wife has to separate from her current husband, and she can't marry the Yavam either. The chol hadrachim ha'elu ba, and all of these penalties apply to her as well, because she got married when she really wasn't supposed to. It turned out the Yivam was not taken care of properly. And so the Gemara says, again, according to Rav Sheshes, V'amai, why should this be true? Neima mai havel olam eved, we should say, what else should she have done? She thought the Yivam was taken care of, she did nothing wrong. And to that the Gemara says, Iboi lo lam tunei, no, she should have waited, she should have made sure that the Yivam was good, that this woman was not an islandess, and only then should she have gotten remarried. And the Gemara continues, Amar Abaya says, Tashma, coming here, another proof to this issue. Kol harayos she'amru potros tzarosei. And in all the situations, let's say there's arayos, cases of erva, so the halach is tzaras erva is potter from doing yibum, like we said in the first Mishnah of the Masechta. So halchut tzaros v'nisus. So now let's say those co-wives go and they get married because they think there's no chiyuv of yibum, because one of their co-wives is an erva. V'nimtzu elo islandess. But then it turns out that this co-wife that was an erva is actually an islandess, and so therefore there is an obligation of yibum here. And again, they shouldn't have gotten married. So the same thing applies. Teitze mizeh mizeh, they have to separate from both, from their current husbands, and they can't do the yibum. V'chol hadrachim ha'elu ba, and all the penalties apply, because again, she married someone when the yibum wasn't really taken care of, or when there really was an obligation of yibum that needed to be taken care of. And so again, the Gemara asks the same kasha, v'amai, and why? According to Rav Sheshes, neima mai havel olam eved, we should say, what else should she have done? And the Gemara answers the same as before, iboi lalam tunei, no, she should have waited. They should have made sure that that their co-wife, who was an erva, they should have made sure that that individual was not an islandess. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rava says, Tashma, come in here, another proof to this issue. Kasav sofer get leish v'shover leisha. Let's say the sofer, he wrote the get for the man and the shover for the woman. V'toah, but then he made a mistake. V'nasan get leisha, the sofer accidentally gave the get to the woman. V'shover leisha, and he gave the shover, that's like the receipt, he gave that to the man. V'nasnu zelazeh v'zelazeh, and then they gave it to each other, they gave it backwards. In other words, the woman gave the get to the man, and the man gave the shover to the woman. Well, achar zman, then after some time goes by, harei get yotzi mitachas yadeo ish, v'shover mitachas yadeo ish. It turns out that the husband, the man, is holding the get, and the woman is holding the shover, and it wasn't really a proper divorce. Meanwhile, she had went and gotten remarried. So that says the same thing. Teitze mizeh mizeh v'chol hadrachim ha'elu ba. She has to separate from both, and all of the penalties apply because again she got remarried when she should not have, because it was not a proper get. So again the Gemara says, Ve'amai, why should this be true according to Rav Sheshes? Neima mai havel olam eved. We should say, what else could she have done? It was an honest mistake. And the Gemara answers, Iboi lo lakruya legita. No, what happened was what she should have done was, again, she should have had a Talmud Chacham read the get and make sure that it was all kosher. And the Gemara continues, Amar Ravashi. Ravashi says, Tashma, come in here. Another proof, Shina Shemo Shema, Shemiru v'Shemiru. Let's say the man's name or her name was changed on the get, or the name of his city or the name of her city. Again, it's not a kosher get. Teitzim mizeh mizeh. She has to separate from both. V'chol hadrachim ha'elu. And again, all of the penalties apply. Same question, V'amai and why? Name of my havel lemevet. Again, according to Rav Sheshes, we should say, what else could she have done? And again, the Gemara says, Iboilo lakri legita. She should have had the get be read by a professional. Make sure that it was kosher. And the Gemara continues, Amar Ravina says, Tashma, come in here. Another proof to this issue. Kansa beget kereach. Let's say a man marries a woman on the basis of a get, thinking it was kosher, but it was really a get kereach. It's a bald get, so to speak, means to say it's missing signatures. So again, it's not a good get. Teitze mizeh mizeh. Again, she has to separate from both, and all the penalties apply. So again, it's the same question. What else could she have done? And again, the Gemara answers, again, she should have had the get be read by somebody who would understand that the get was not kosher. And the Gemara continues, Rav Papa savar l'miyavid uvda, but my havel l'mevid. Rav Papa thought to issue a ruling in a case of my havel l'mevid. In other words, Rav Papa thought to say there was a particular case that came up, and he thought to issue this exact ruling and say, what else should she have done, and excuse what the woman had done. As Rashi over here says, savar l'mevid uvda, but my havel l'mevid ulahachzir l'bala eshasish shenisas beidim. It was exactly a case in eshasish. She married, she had witnesses that said the husband had died. It turned out the husband was alive, and he said, my havel l'mevid. What else should she have done? She should be allowed to go back to her first husband. And so the Gemara continues, Amar le Rav Huna bereider Rav Yoshua le Rav Papa. So Rav Huna, the son of Rav Yoshua, said to Rav Papa, V'atanya kol hani masnaisa. But what about all these mishnayos we just learned over here? And it seems to be that we don't rely on the argument of my havale lemevad. As Rashi over here says, V'atanya kol hani v'lo amrinan my havale lemevad. We don't say my havale lemevad in all of these cases. Rather, we say the penalties do apply. So how could it be? He's asking Rav Papa, how could you excuse these penalties? And so the Gemara continues, Amar le. So Rav Papa said back to Rav Huna bereider Rav Yoshua, but in all of these cases, we answered it up. We said in all of these cases, there was something that could have been done. So Amar Le, so he said back to him, are we relying on these answers? In other words, you have so many mishnayos that seem to indicate that we do not rely on my havel lemevad. How could you rely on such an argument? As Rashi over here says, Amar Le v'lo shaninu Amar Le v'ashinuye lismochim zed dochik. If it's a dochik answer, we should rely. Umetar it's lidchok ateshuva anon memela shamin. And we see from all these mishnayos, the lo amrin on my havel lemevad, that you don't make this argument of my havel lemevad. And so the girsa continues in some gemaras upasak. So therefore, Rav Papa stopped and he decided not to rely on my havel lemevad, as Rashi says, upasak v'nimna v'lo avid uvda. He decided not to rely on this ruling again. He accepted the argument of Rav Huna bereider Rav Yoshua that it seems we do not rely on my havel lemevad, and instead we do say that there's a penalty in such a case. We do not allow the woman to return to her original husband. And the Gemara continues, Amar Ravashi. Ravashi says, in this case of our Mishnah, we're not concerned with rumors. Rashi over here says, let's say you have a case like our Mishnah, where she marries with the permission of the court, and then a rumor spreads that her husband is alive, but we don't actually see her husband. So Ravashi says we don't need to be concerned with such a rumor. And the Gemara says, Hi Kala, what exactly, when did this rumor occur? And if we're talking about a rumor after she had already gotten remarried to somebody else, that Chiddush Ravashi already said once. The Amar Ravashi, because Ravashi said, and we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf 91b Amud Aleph.